Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you for inviting me to share our case study from Leicestershire and Barnardo's work that we've been doing. So I'm going to talk you through some slides really that will take you through the process that we went to procure a partnership in Leicestershire. And then I'm going to also just touch on one of the outcomes that we've already achieved through a co-design work that we've done. So the problem, and I'm sure looking at the list of attendees, there's other local authority colleagues on the call, and I think many can relate to these problems around traditional procurement not providing the flexibility for individual need, budget pressures, lack of innovation within the market, a rising number of looked after children, which Jonathan was alluding to in his opening remarks, perceived lack of market sufficiency. And I say perceived because actually when we looked at the data in Leicestershire, there was children's homes in Leicestershire. Leicestershire children weren't in them beds though. And again, that's a common theme that we see, is that over 50% of Leicestershire children were being placed out of county because they weren't getting them available beds in county. There was a lack of responsiveness to crisis intervention, so a lot of the out of authority ones were going out of county due to the complexities of their needs and no provision available to meet them needs in county. And there was some silo working. I think we do see sometimes within children's services that there's very silo working, and we needed to start thinking about better collaboration across the whole system. And capacity of resources to create innovation and system change. I think, you know, the frustration sometimes when you've got a day job to do is having the time and resource to step out of that day job to be able to really create that innovation and system change. So the solution was to develop a children's innovation partnership, a strategic partnership, and the thoughts that we wanted to think about at that point around moving away from transactional commissioning to relational commissioning was that we really wanted to procure a partner rather than a service, and we wanted that partner to be able to co-design, co-develop and co-deliver the services, and that was the tricky bit, was to bring in that co-delivery into the model as well. We wanted to focus on system change and improve outcomes for young people. We wanted to offer co-investment into service design, share new and emerging best practice, and walk alongside children's service on their journey to excellence. So this wasn't about bringing a partner in to save a failing authority. It was about recognising that a partner could bring added value to the local authority in that co-design work. We wanted to ensure that services were designed and delivered to offer best quality and price. And develop a culture of transparency, trust, shared values and innovation. So that was our kind of wish list, if you like, that we thought, oh, that's what we need. The questions that we were asking at the time, so I had my first internal meeting, I was the head of commissioning and planning in Leicestershire County Council at the time, and my questions that when I went to procurement and went to legal was, well, what is your scope? What are your timescales? What's the value? What procurement directive would you use? How can we engage the market? Do we know if there is a market appetite? What about intellectual property? Who do we need to engage with? What are the risks, financial and reputational? How do you mitigate the risk? How will you measure impact? What are the other system relational commissioning models are there and how were they commissioned? All very relevant questions. But all questions that needed to be worked through before we could convince people that it was possible to procure a partnership rather than a service. So the reality, though, was that Leicestershire County Council Children's Services did not have all the answers at that stage. But what we did have was a strong governance that believed in the proposal. So the Director of Children's Services was completely backing this proposal and believed that we could achieve it. We just needed to work through the answers to all of them questions. We did have a vision on what could we achieve working in partnership. We did have a senior leadership team who were committed to innovation and system change. And we did believe that transactional commissioning did not have a future in children's services. And we did have evidence of improved commissioning outcomes where relational commissioning principles had been applied. So where we had good relationships with our providers, and were able to flex services, we saw better outcomes for young people. So we absolutely believed in the model. So the journey that we went on, the first thing that we did was establish what we called the SIP board, the Children's Innovation Partnership Board, which was chaired by the Director of Children's Services and had representation from other key stakeholders across the local authority, including procurement, legal, and other business partners across the organisation. We took external advice, identified and adopted. So I was fortunate to be part of E3M Bold Commissioners, and so was having conversations with Jonathan and with Julian, which exposed me to be able to think more innovatively about how we could achieve what we were talking about. We put a core team together. So I took on the lead as a strategic lead, and that was backfilled by putting a service manager in to cover some of my main commissioning duties in the council, because this was becoming more of my day job, creating this partnership. And I had a single point of contact in procurement and legal, and we were the kind of trio that moved this forward. We had a communication strategy about who were our key stakeholders, who were our key influencers, who did we need to target for a communication point of view. We had a risk log, which was quite a long risk log, but that was actually quite good that it was quite a long risk log, because it gave us something to be able to go through methodically to evidence to legal that we had been able to mitigate every risk, or minimise, should I say, every risk. Solution-focused approach was applied, internal and external check and challenge at each stage. We did do some market engagement to test that market. We did a prior information notice, and we had provider dialogues. We had some light bulb moments. So every problem seemed like we wasn't going to get over that hurdle, but we'd have a light bulb moment and create some innovation that helped us on to the next stage. We did take council advice because our legal department in the authority still felt that there was risk that we hadn't mitigated. So we did take some council advice, who did say that there were a level of risks around procuring this partnership in the way that we'd suggested, but that we needed to manage them risks to be able to convince the kind of leaders in the council that we had been through a due diligence to reduce them risks. And we got to the point that we advertised an invitation to tender, which was 12 months from concept to award. So from that very early concept of wouldn't it be great if we had a partnership to actually awarding the partnership was a 12-month journey. So how did we do it? Well, we did it by, we scoped out, we came up with the answers basically to the questions. So we answered the questions in the end as the scope was edge of care through to leaving care, and potentially anything in that scope in children's services. The timescale, the partnership would be a commitment of 10 years, but and have an annual break clause in it. So either party can end that relationship each year. The value was a tricky one, because we wasn't actually suggesting we were purchasing anything up front. We were procuring a partner, but we actually put the value at everything from edge of care through to leaving care, which was £70 million a year. Actually, that should say 700 million. The OJU was actually advertised at, because it was a 10-year partnership. And I did get a call from the leader of the council on that day to say, what on earth have you just advertised an OJU for £700 million for? I said, don't worry, I've not spent anything, because we went with a two-tier contractual model. So we had a collaboration agreement, which was the actual partnership, which didn't have a financial value to it. And then the second element is service delivery contracts, and that's where the financial value comes in and is agreed at the point of co-design. The evaluation, method statement, questions and interviews. So that was tricky, because we were evaluating a partner rather than a service. And the award was to Barnardo's as the winning bidder. Mobilisation was Barnardo's assistant director was co-located in the Leicestershire departmental management team from day one. So Barnardo's had already put a full-time resource into this partnership. And the leadership, the partnership board became a lead from the local authority and a lead from Barnardo's, and we jointly implemented the development of the partnership. So this is the model in a diagram, and you can see there, if you start with number 1, that once we got into the partnership, the board kind of come up with what was the wicked problem, and the first wicked problem was obviously, as I mentioned earlier, residential care. So that went into a design brief, and a design brief was written to say, this is what we want a design team to go away and look at and come back with some solutions, some proposals about how we might change the way that we commission residential care in the future. That design team was established, and when the design team, and I'll talk you through the little bit about the actual design team in a minute, but once they'd done what they needed to do, the service delivery specification was costed and agreed. So again, that's in a trusting, transparent way with your partner that you are co-designing and co-developing them specifications. That's then wrapped up in a service delivery contract, and that service delivery contract is pretty much the same as any other traditional procurement, in as much as that's where the transaction is taking place. So there's a legally binding contract around that transactional contract. And then we move into service mobilisation and implementation, and then we have service contract reviews. So the 4, 5 and 6 does turn more into traditional commissioning, but it doesn't feel like it because you've co-designed and co-developed the services. So you're working very open and transparent. So in the first 18 months, the first design brief was issued, and that has resulted in a 2.5 capital investment from the council, and a 500k revenue to develop the therapeutic trauma-informed support for placement. So that's a wraparound therapeutic support service. So within the first 18 months, the council had committed £3 million to the partnership. The Barnardo's had already also worked with the local authority through their business development team to bid right, and were successful in winning bids of 1.5 million external funding, and that was for things like the holiday activity and food, family group conferencing, life skills programme, and we also had year 1 evaluation completed by Bedfordshire University, and year 2 funded additional project management, and that's joint funding across Barnardo's and Leicestershire to fund a project manager and a project officer. We got highly commended in the innovation at the National Go Awards, which we were really excited about, and our relational commissioning model was adopted for looked after placements procurement as well. So we developed another system around looked after children that followed that same relational commissioning model. And actually the LCC strategic lead, which is me, was seconded to Barnardo's, which was in the great spirit of the partnership to allow me to go into Barnardo's to support Barnardo's to think about developing strategic partnerships broader. And that's going really well, and having several conversations with local authorities currently about how that might work for other local authorities. And scoping next steps and opportunities, a system change journey towards better outcomes for children and young people. So that's where we are at after 18 months. So there's some key learning here just before I move on and talk about the first design brief. Don't give up. You can do it. Unpicking problems creates solutions. So we didn't go to anywhere with a problem, we went with a solution. Collaboration and co-production with providers pre-ITT. Don't be scared to talk to your market. You know, it really is something that as long as you're open and transparent in the way that you do it, you can have a dialogue with your market. Keep searching for them light bulb moments. They are there. It's okay to challenge the status quo. Surround yourself with can-do people. I'm a can-do person, and I can't work with people who only bring problems. So surround yourself by them people who believe in what you can do. Seek out service matter experts and quote them. I quoted Julian and Jonathan lots of times through my process. It's like, well, Julian Blake is a senior lawyer so use them people and influence. Create credible, robust business cases, and that is really important, and believe in the art of the possible. And I think that's what I would sum up as what got me through procuring that partnership. So how did the opportunity begin? That design brief was issued by the Children's Innovation Partnership Board, and we developed that design brief to establish the SIP design team. That was people from Barnardo's and Leicestershire formed that team. We did further analysis on the current residential data, We wanted to understand themes of need and how this matches to market availability. We wanted to understand local sufficiency issues, as there was more than enough residential homes, as I mentioned earlier, but over 50% of our young people were out of county. We wanted to identify local gaps in provision in relation to age, need and willingness to provide flexible creative packages. We wanted to identify creative solutions to respond to them gaps. And we wanted to consider the use of a property that we already had that was a children's home and was closed. And we wanted to develop service contracts for the implementation of the plan. So how did we shape the opportunity? Upon receipt of the brief, the analysis of the strengths, areas for development and opportunities within the county were assessed in a number of ways. So we did a data analysis. So we looked at last 5 years data and brought in additional mosaic tables of our data systems and placement episode data over the last 3 years and interrogated some of the key messages that was telling us. Barnardo's undertook a primary research which looked at a range of professionals to ascertain attitudes and responses to the current structures. And we did a secondary research which was conducted by Barnardo's National Policy and Research team and considered national trends in policy and practice. So this is the feedback that we got around that design brief, and the team of people that came together to do that described it as being collaboratively. They felt that LCC and Barnardo's colleagues and other stakeholders, and particularly young people, because we did a whole consultation with young people, which generated a number of important themes. It was interactive. The workshops, obviously this was in the day when we could meet in a room, but the workshops looked at contributing causes to placement failure, which began earlier in the placement journey. It was evidence-based, so the workshop engaged in the theory of change model, which offered the opportunity, space and resources to innovate. It was empowering, it was reflective, but most of all it was satisfying, as the solution model identified that better matching to achieve right placement first time would take place with better assessment and the placements for the child to have their needs met. But it was almost equally important that the child felt control, agency and choice. And so they were all of the concepts that we brought into the model that was then presented to the board. And just lastly, I'm just going to quickly take you through that model. If you can have the next slide, please. So this was the picture that we presented to the board as the outcome of that design brief. So you'll see on the left-hand side that you've got a placement is required, the little red box. If the needs are clear, then there is still the need for a local market. And if the local market can't provide, we may still have to go for an out-of-county market. So this model doesn't replace the whole of the residential market, but what it does provide is for them young people that were not able to place locally because of the complexities or because of the needs of that young person, this model will hopefully meet them needs. So in the middle of your circle there, you've got the hub, which is an assessment and resource team. That's a wraparound therapeutic support team that work with step up, step out, step down kind of placements to stabilise that young person and support that young person on their placement journey. Around that, you've got the light green, which is an assessment bed. So that is going to be a new build in Colville. The builders will be on site shortly and it will open in May next year. It will be a short-term assessment bed for young people 8 to 12-year-old, where we see that regular placement breakdown results in them ending up in complex placements out of county at the age of 9 and 10 in residential care because they're not quite ready for that foster care placement. And so this is about being able to regulate their behaviours and work with them therapeutically and find their destination placement and make that right placement first time. So that's your assessment beds. And then around that, we put in 3 multifunctional properties because when we built the model, we wasn't sure what we wanted their multifunctional properties to do. We felt the need that we wanted to look at the data again nearer the time once we'd sourced the properties. But what we did know is we needed assets. And that was where we wanted to get to the point that we'd got capital investment from the council. I can now say that them 3 multifunctional properties, one will be an under 16s children's home with a particular focus on CSAE. The other one will be a over 16s children's home as a transition into adulthood, but it will be a children's home and not a 16+ supported accommodation because we expect that the young people will have care needs as well as the accommodation needs. And the third property will be a parent and child placement. So we're using the Welland House, which was the building that we already had, and converting it into 3 flats, and that work is already started. And we will have parent and child placements within them 3 flats, and work collaboratively with Leicestershire Social Care around them court-directed placements. And yeah, that's all of them properties. Sorry, I was thinking, have I missed one there? Oh, sorry, no, the other property that will be attached to the assessment bed unit will be the hub. So there'll be a base for the hub. So the hub will be on site at the Colville assessment bed home. So that was the model. In addition to that model, there's all the principles about it being trauma informed, about young people having choice, an agency in the way that their placements are made, and around the internal matching, and some of the other recommendations that came out about what that should look like. So that's where we've got to with that particular design brief. I just thought I'd share that with you, and I don't think we would have got there without being so collaborative with our partner to design that. Thank you.